Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are so excited to see so many of you joining us. This is the Thrive Series, Fall 2021. So welcome. My name is Lissa, and on behalf of the Thrive Planning Team, I'm so happy to welcome you back. We had a phenomenal winter session earlier this year and are delighted to be able to bring you this next series. If you're new to the Thrive series, we are so happy to have you here. And if you've joined us before, welcome back. We are looking forward to spending the next 6 sessions across 7 weeks with you this fall. And just as a reminder, the Thrive program is a collaboration between mHealth Fairview and the Masonic Cancer Center, so the clinical and the research arms of cancer. And we're so proud to offer you this fall series. We have phenomenal speakers lined up and topics that you gave us feedback on in our last series. So we're so excited to bring that to you this fall. Today is the first session, so don't forget to mark your calendar for every Tuesday at 6 p.m. except for October 19th. So today through October 26th, not on the 19th. And of course, you can pick and choose which sessions you'd like to attend, and you can always rewatch a session or catch up on one you may have missed on our website, which is z.umn.edu/Thrive series. Before we get started with the presentation today, I want to take a quick minute to introduce you to the ladies behind the scenes. Of course, you'll recognize some familiar faces, but you're also going to see some new ones, and you'll expect to see us all throughout the next 6 weeks. So again, my name is Lissa Martinez-Hubner, and I am the Masonic Cancer Center's Senior Event and Project Coordinator. I'm happy to introduce Kaya Verich, who is mHealth Fairview Survivorship Program Manager, Linda Mace, who is the mHealth Fairview Survivorship Program Coordinator Nurse, and Amna Hussein, who is the Masonic Cancer Center's Community Engagement Coordinator. So this is the team, this is the powerhouse behind the series. In your homes, give them an imaginary round of applause. And now I'm going to turn things over to Amna to get us started. So Amna, take it away.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, and good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you all today. And also just to kick off our first Thrive session of the series. And so tonight we will be hearing from oncology nutritionist Kelly Scheller-Williams. Kelly has over 20 years of experience as a registered dietitian and has been working specifically with cancer patients for 8 years now. In this session, Kelly will provide nutrition information, tips for those who have completed treatment, and suggestions for those who are living with cancer. Kelly will share practical tips for grocery shopping related to the nutritional needs of cancer survivors. She will also provide she's also provided a few fun suggestions for snacks that incorporate cancer fighting foods and look absolutely delicious. These recipes, along with the slides and any supplemental material, will be posted on our website, z.umn.edu/Thrive series. We will record tonight's session and every session so that you can always refer back to the recordings on our website. We edit every recording before we post it to ensure your privacy. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Kelly, to take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, you guys. What a pleasure to be here with all of you. Yes, I'm Kelly, registered dietitian. I primarily work in oncology, and it's so nice to see so many registrants and so many participants here prioritizing your nutrition, because it means so much. Obviously, nutrition is a huge piece of the puzzle of our journey of health. So give yourself a pat on the back for being here tonight and taking the time to prioritize nutrition. I really appreciate that. So today I want to talk about how to assess your current disease risk by using BMI, which stands for Body Mass Index, along with the waist circumference and metabolic syndrome markers. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means. And also to understand a balanced diet, being able to identify appropriate serving sizes, and using the MyPlate method for all of this. And there's just a plethora of information on the myplate.gov website that you can always refer to as well if you have questions after this presentation. I'll explain the benefits of organic foods. Should I eat organic? Should I not eat organic? We'll talk about grocery shopping that can help prevent cancer. And then also I'll help you identify personal goals and setting goals for yourself to help reduce your risk as well. So I know that's a mouthful, but we'll get through it all. So whether you're currently going through cancer treatment or whether you've finished cancer treatment and now you're looking for cancer prevention, we'll talk about lifestyle changes that really can make a difference. Whether you change today or change tomorrow, anytime it matters. So taking those baby steps, of course, towards good health. So I want to start with the American Institute of Cancer Research recommendations. They call it a blueprint to beating cancer. Number one is being at a healthy weight. So looking at your weight in terms of BMI, which we'll talk about a little bit, obesity has been directly related to multiple health risks, whether it's diabetes, heart disease, including cancers. So good to know where your weight's at and where your weight should be. The number two is being physically active. Their guidelines suggest at least 30 minutes, 5 times a week. And, if you're currently not active, start out for 5 minutes and you'll work your way towards that. It's not that you have to start at 30 minutes right here, right now. It's, again, taking baby steps. Number three is eating a diet rich in whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and beans. Number four, limiting consumption of fast foods, processed foods, and foods that are high in fats, starches, and sugars. Number five, limiting consumption of red or processed meats. They suggest eating no more than 11 to 18 ounces of red meat per week, 11 to 12 to 18, and then best to avoid processed meats if possible. That's the one thing the American Institute for Cancer Research does recommend when it comes to avoiding. Avoid. They do say avoid, if possible, processed meats because there is a direct link to cancer with the nitrates that are in those. And we can talk a little bit more about that as well. Number six is limiting the consumption of sugar-sweetened drinks as beverages, as there's a direct link to cancer and obesity as well. And then seven, limiting alcohol consumption. Any reduction in alcohol will lower your risk for cancer. So just know that, of course, with all these guidelines, any reduction in any of this will definitely lower the risk. And then not using supplements to protect against cancer. And you've probably heard this before, but whole foods are always best, right? They're always best before supplements. And, supplements are great if needed for certain conditions, if there's been some bone loss during treatment, if iron is low. So always consult with a doctor, dietitian, or even pharmacist regarding any supplements that you're interested in taking. Really, we can get all our nutrition through whole foods, but when we have barriers to eating, of course, sometimes that's not possible. And number 9, for mothers, breastfeeding babies for up to 6 months can be definitely beneficial to protecting against breast cancer as well. So then the final one is after a cancer diagnosis, just following the AICR guidelines here and recommendations. Again, that blueprint to help beat cancer, and all of these guidelines, if you follow one, if you follow them, they're all, any of one or the other is all beneficial. So just working your way towards lifestyle change, because again, it doesn't happen overnight. We all get that. Okay, so this slide here is assessing your current disease by using BMI, waist circumference, and metabolic markers. So I'll start with BMI. So body mass index. You might know your number, you may not, but something you may have heard the acronym thrown around. And this number can get a little tricky or deceiving or wonky because it's based merely off of height and weight. So if you look down the left column, it lists the height, and if you go across the top, it's the weight. So if you have somebody who has a BMI, well, let's start with this. If you have somebody who is solid muscle weighs more than fat, and maybe for example, a professional football player, they don't have much in terms of fat whatsoever, but because of their weight, that's going to drive the BMI up. So that's where it gets a little tricky in terms of BMI. But in general, looking at that, let's say, for example, you look at someone who's 5'10", and you go across, the blue is underweight, the gray category is normal weight, the yellow is overweight, and then the red is obesity. So if we took, say, a gentleman who's 5'10", and you cross all the way over, and let's say they weigh 200 pounds. If I go over to 5'10", 200 pounds, that puts the BMI right at 30. So right on the border of the overweight and the obese category. And so if you know your numbers, if you look at your height and weight, you can use this chart to help you identify where your BMI is at. And, you know, if your weight is elevated, let's into the, you know, the obese category, let's work on getting that down to the overweight category. If it's an overweight category, let's work on getting that down to the normal category. So use this table later as your reference just to know your numbers and where your BMI is at. And this table here just shows the exact numbers. So starting with the below, if you're 18.5 or less, you're underweight. And this is important too for some of you who may be going through cancer treatment. It's important to know that maybe it's not just about obesity. We want to make sure your BMI is in the normal range during treatment because this improves your prognosis. Being at an optimal weight and well nourished can definitely make you feel better just overall and increase your health. So in knowing that, if you're in the underweight category, it's just important to get that weight back up to the normal weight category, which would be 18.5 to 24.9. And I won't go through all these numbers, so I'll let you look at where you're at and then look at these tables. But it's just another good table to help you reference to where you're at in terms of your body weight. So for overweight and obesity, it is clearly linked to increased risk for cancers. For these cancers listed here, just a plethora of them. So, breast cancer, colon, endometrium, kidney, liver, cervix, and so on. There's numerous types of cancers that are linked to obesity. A lot of studies on it. So knowing where your numbers are at and focusing on improving that if you're in the overweight or obese category. Okay, so this might be the one that's confusing. Maybe you've never heard of this before. What does it mean? So what is metabolic syndrome? So there's 5 things here, and it refers to these 5 conditions, which are risk factors for heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and can also relate to your cancer risk. While each of these conditions is a risk factor by itself, having 3 or more of them would be diagnosed as metabolic syndrome. So a person with metabolic syndrome is twice as likely to develop a heart disease and 5 times as likely to develop diabetes. So the nutrition goal after cancer treatment is to promote overall health and reduce the risk of cancer reoccurrence, as well as managing risks for other diseases. So healthy lifestyle changes, which we'll list, can definitely prevent and delay the metabolic syndrome. So here's where I want to ask you these questions. So knowing your numbers, what are your numbers? What's your waist inches? So for women, your waist inches is very important. If you have more of that apple shape, that adipose tissue around your organs, it's harder for your organs to work. So it would be good to reduce that adipose tissue or fat tissue around your organs. So measuring your waist for both men and women, take a cloth fabric tape measure and start at your belly button and bring it directly around your waist. And if you have a measurement of 35 or higher, then give yourself mark in that category, yes. For men, if it's 40 inches or more. And then triglycerides, is it over 150 or are you on medication to reduce your triglycerides? And for women, your HDL, and for men, HDL less than 50 and less than 40 respectively. So HDL is your high density lipoprotein, and we want that higher because there's a lot of workers working to remove the cholesterol from your blood and bring it back to your liver to be excreted. So the higher your HDL, greater than 50 would be ideal for women and greater than 40 for men. And again, if you're on medications to treat those, then you would still mark yes. And then high blood pressure, if it's greater than 130 over 85, or on medication. If no, mark no. If yes, and so on. So, and then the fifth one is your fasting blood glucose, if you know that number. If it's greater than 100, or if you're on medication to treat it, and or if you have a fasting blood sugar of 100 to 125, that would be considered pre-diabetes. So after you've looked at all these, and if you know your numbers, if you don't, I would suggest you inquire about that and get some labs drawn, see where they're at. It's so important. And if you do get your numbers back, or if you already have them, take a peek. And if you answer yes to more of these, or to 3 or more of these 5 questions, then you would be diagnosed of having metabolic syndrome. So how can you reduce your risk, or how can you reverse it? Of course, lifestyle changes, diet, behavioral changes. The first one is just losing weight. If you need to lose weight, bring those waist inches down. Being physically active, of course, these come from the American Center for Cancer Research Diet Recommendations and Guidelines. Tobacco cessation, if you're currently smoking or chewing tobacco, be good to quit that. That can reduce your risk. Limiting alcohol consumption. And then, of course, changing dietary habits, including eating a heart-healthy diet, can definitely help these numbers and reduce your risk for the metabolic syndrome. So hopefully that helps answer that question of what is metabolic syndrome, and gives you a good idea of how you can reduce that if you do answer yes to 3 or more of those questions. So diet changes, the word diet, my goodness, is that booming word that people don't like to hear, including myself. What kind of diet should I be on? You might get all this unsolicited advice from family, from friends, or maybe you go to Dr. Google and you seek out information about what diets are best for this condition or that condition. I don't like to take any of that advice or really search on Dr. or Mr. Google. I like to hear from a professional, whether it's your doctor, your dietitian, your pharmacist. So I do recommend a specific diet, but if not, those diets that are touted and those diets that are seem glamorous, like the keto diet or the Atkins diet, I'm sure you've all heard of those. Those specific diets can cause problems, especially if you're going through cancer treatment. They can cause, especially the keto diet, it can cause nausea, diarrhea, constipation, and not to mention that you're not getting a good variety of nutrients when those diets are so specific. So what diet am I going to suggest? Maybe some of you, if you've seen me in a consult in clinic, you might know, or if your doctor's recommended it, but it's just the Mediterranean-based diet. And if you haven't heard of this, we will provide information for you on it in terms of our specific diet guidelines we have and that we give to patients. But it's a diet that's been researched to help reduce risk for all sorts of diseases, including obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and even cancer. So this is one that I highly recommend that people look into and that people follow. And the base of the pyramid, so as you see it, when you go up in the pyramid, you're eating less and less. So the base of it is exercising. Our bodies were made to move. So as you're able, get out and start moving. Having meals with family members, sit down and enjoy your meal. Try to remove yourself from the hustle and bustle of life and enjoy a meal. And then the base of this pyramid includes more plant-based. So it's, as you can see, the bright, beautiful colors, fruits and vegetables and whole grains, seeds, nuts, legumes, avocados, olive oil. So all those nutritional foods that are full of phytochemicals, antioxidants, fibers that all help reduce our risk for cancers. And then when you go up in the pyramid, you see it gets smaller. So the next category is seafood, fish, salmon, anything, that's in the water, and good protein sources there. And the next category, if you're following me, is the two-legged animals. So chicken, turkey, and then dairy products and eggs. And then at the tippy top, you see the red meat and the sugars. And we know we've heard a lot about sugar, so we can talk about that later, answer some questions that you already have. But this one diet, it doesn't specifically tell you have to 100% have to omit anything. It's allowing you to have anything you want, but in moderation and in smaller portions. So when you see the top, four-legged animals, pigs, beef, cows, it's okay to have, just choose them less often. The sugar, the sweet treats that we like, I know I have a sweet tooth myself, ice cream, cookies, cakes, you can have them, just choose them less often. So the guidelines that we have will indicate how many servings of each, and I'll talk about that in our next coming slides, and how many servings we should have of these types of foods each day. Okay, so that being said, understanding balanced diet and identifying appropriate serving sizes using those MyPlate guidelines, which again come from the myplate.gov. Great website for a lot of information on nutrition, as well as the American Institute for Cancer Research. Okay, so here's the plate. Maybe some of you have seen the plate. Maybe you haven't, but what it is
very important
healthy,
slide. But
What was it about?
a
the
healthy meal
Mediterranean diet and how it, the triangle,
more
have more of and less.
proteins and grains. So you're taking half of your plate and you're choosing to be fruits and vegetables, and mostly the vegetables, a little less calories, less sugar. And then you divide that second half of the plate into two, and you'll have that third or 2/3 cup of grain, and then that 3-ounce serving of lean protein. So I like to show the analogy of these two pictures on the side here on the right side, the typical American plate, which is the meat and potatoes. So you see the plate is full, it's pretty much covered with that nice, lean, juicy steak. And then it's got a good, healthy serving of mashed potatoes and gravy with a little dollop of some green beans. But our new American plate, which I should make bigger, but our new American plate, half of the plate looks like roasted vegetables with a serving of lean protein, and then that smaller portion of grain. So that is more of the Mediterranean-based diet where we should be. So looking at these guidelines and choosing more vegetables for half your plate, it's filling. It gives you more fiber, it gives you more nutrition, just overall healthy. Okay, so I'm not sure if we're going to do a poll here. I forgot to ask, but I have some questions here, some trivia questions. So true or false? Eating at least, and this might be a trick question, eating at least 3 servings of fruits and vegetables each day may reduce your risk for cancer. Let you think about it. I'll give you the answer. Okay, well, it's false, which is a trick question, I think, because research shows that including at least 5 servings a day may reduce your risk for cancer. Of course, if you're not eating many, maybe 1 to 2, of course, eating 3 is going to be better than none. And the studies further show that choosing 7 to 9 servings is even more beneficial. So if you can, like I say, start small. If you're currently eating 2 servings a day, increase it to 3 and set a goal to work your way up towards 4 or 5 and so on in the upcoming weeks or even months. A serving of vegetables, you guys, it doesn't take much really. A half a cup of chopped vegetables, a cup of leafy greens, which is the size of my fist, or close to an apple or a tennis ball, that would be a serving. So if you look at a tennis ball, serving a fruit or a full cup of fresh fruits or vegetables, and a half cup of either chopped or cooked, and then 6 ounces or 3/4 of a cup of fruit or vegetable juice would be a serving. But be careful to limit the juices because they add up in sugar pretty quickly. So always choosing whole fruits, whole vegetables first before choosing the juices. Okay. So here's another question. Reduce your cancer risk, limit red meats and processed meats to less than 11 to 12 to 18 ounces per week. That's true. So limit those four-legged friends, beef, pork, lamb, and avoid those processed meats such as ham, bacon, sausage, pepperoni, hot dogs, lunch meats. They're all out there. And some people, a lot of people like to eat deli meats, luncheon meats, and great source of protein, right? Not as many calories. Some are loaded in salt, but you want to be careful with the ones that contain nitrates because there is a direct link to cancer with even the meats that they slice for you behind the counter. So you really want to find out if they include nitrates by reading the labels, or ask the person behind the counter, or find other varieties or brands that are safer, they're more natural, like Applegate Farms is one, Boar's Head is another. So those are some options if you really do like to get some protein through some of these deli and luncheon meats, turkey, chicken, and so on. Okay, and a serving size doesn't take much. So when we fill up our plate, like that previous slide, the palm of my hand, or a size of a deck of cards is actually a serving of meat. And I know some men out there who can have 3 or 4 of those. It doesn't take much, but really the serving and all we need is the 3 ounces. And so compare that to a deck of cards when you're preparing yourself some protein. And then in terms of plant-based proteins, which are very healthy, more Mediterranean-based, a half a cup of cooked beans, lentils, peas, and then even furthermore plant-based would be a half a cup of tofu, would be serving sizes of those plant-based proteins. And these plant-based proteins don't have as much protein as some of the animal-based do, but great sources, they do. They can add up, and these are definitely choices you want to try to include into your diet a little more often. So if you eat fish, poultry, lean red meat, cheese, and other animal foods, make sure that they take up a third or less space on your plate, and then you save the rest for those nice colorful vegetables, both the vegetables, fruits, and a little bit of grain. Okay, so there's a question out there about vegetarian and vegan. We'll talk about that as well, but another question here, true or false? Combining legumes, which are the beans, lentils, and peas, seeds, and nuts with a whole grain provides the same quality of protein as found in meat, poultry, and fish. True, absolutely. So we can get all of those amino acids if we combine those grains with some of those plant-based proteins, just like we find in the meats. Examples would be the black bean salsa, corn salsa with some brown rice, or pinto beans on a whole wheat pita, adding some vegetables to make it look a little fancier. Split pea soup with barley, and peanut butter on a whole wheat piece of toast. So they're simple ideas. It doesn't take much, but having those plant-based proteins with a vegetable will definitely complete that protein. And on a side note, only grain out there that is a complete protein, maybe some of you already know, is quinoa. So if you haven't tried quinoa, go ahead and try it. It's a complete protein. It's a great grain. I know I've made it many different ways, finally to make it fancy, and finally I just simply made it just how it says on the package, boil the water, add it, and serve it. My kids liked it. They didn't like any other way except for just plain. So if you don't like it the first time, try it a few more times. Give yourself some more tries, because I think you might like it. It's a great choice. And that leads us into our serving size of grains here. So a slice of bread, half of a hamburger bun. I like those sandwich thins. So if you have like those Arnold's is it, or there's a different brands out there, but the sandwich thins I like because you can get the top and the bottom for a hamburger or for chicken sandwich or some whatever you have. You can get both sides for the same amount of calories as you can get and 1 piece of bread or a half of a hamburger bun. So keeping that in mind. A third cup of rice, pasta or quinoa would be a serving of a grain, and then a half a medium-sized bagel, and approximately a 3/4 cup of cereal. And I always tell my patients to be careful with measuring cereals because you can pour a lot in your bowl and not really know how much you're getting. So if you want to be watching, certain things, calories, reverse measure. Take your cereal measure back into your measuring cup and then back in your bowl. See how much you're actually getting. I know for myself, I was serving myself 2.5 times the serving of what the box said. So now you got to almost triple your calories and your nutrition there if you're tracking it. So measuring is always a good idea. And when you're looking at grains, you guys look for your grains to say whole. Look for 100% whole grain, 100% whole wheat on the label. And if that's kind of confusing, look at the first ingredient. It should say whole wheat flour. Sometimes it'll say enriched wheat flour or wheat flour. That doesn't necessarily count. You want it to say whole wheat flour. And another telltale sign would be looking at the grams of fiber. If it has 3 or 4 more grams of fiber per serving, then you know it's a whole grain. It's going to contain the fiber that's going to give us all the health benefits that we want in terms of keeping our blood sugar stable, good for our digestive system, keeping our body satisfied, prevent cravings, and so on. It's always good to look at that number. Okay, another question here, true or false? So fat-free or low-fat milk provides the same amount of calcium and other nutrients as whole milk. True. If you're looking to reduce calories and saturated fat, choose skim or 1% milk. You want to be careful with, actually this in breast cancer survivors, it's been shown to, they've been recommended to choose lower fat products. So these would be good options for any breast cancer survivors or people going through breast cancer treatment. Sometimes you have to be careful with fat-free products because what happens when they remove the fat from it? They're removing a lot of the flavor, right? That's where the flavor is. So they might be adding sugar or salt. So be very cautious with that. Compare the milks. You might see that the skim milk has a little bit more sugar than the whole milk. So just a little tidbit there for you. And what is a typical serving size of dairy? So 8 ounces of milk, which is a cup, 1 ounce of cheese, which is about 4 dice or a piece of string cheese. Doesn't take much, you guys. And 8 ounces of yogurt. Okay, so one of my favorite yogurts is Siggi's. This is the flatter container you see in the picture here. That's a whole fat product. And there's another one that's a 2% product. So either way, either one of them is good for you. But I have to tell you a story of when I love, you might have your favorite yogurt, but I love Oiko's key lime. It tastes so good and almost like dessert. Well, I looked at the label. I probably should have done that before I bought it. This was a few years ago. And, I no wonder why it tastes like dessert. It basically should be. There's about 17 grams of sugar in that yogurt. So anything really with more than 15 grams of sugar should be considered dessert. So be careful with yogurts out there because there's a lot of them that have a lot of sugar in them. You should probably aim for one that has less than 5 to 8 grams of sugar per serving. Okay. And that brings us to serving size for fats. So fats, avocado. Avocado is considered a fat, although it's fruit. 1/4 of an avocado only. 1 teaspoon of soft margarine or a teaspoon of oil. 1/3 cup or 1.5 ounces of nuts. Also about 3 tablespoons. 2 tablespoons of nut butters, peanut butter, seeded butter, and then 1 tablespoon of regular or 2 tablespoons of low-fat dressing. And the fat-free dressing doesn't count as a serving. So that just gives you an idea of fats. Our body needs fats, healthier fats like the olive oils, avocados, nut butters are always fats that I promote. And you'll see some of that, maybe all of them in some of the recipes that I've posted. Okay, and then sugar. So what are serving sizes of sugar? So a tablespoon of sugar would be considered 1 serving. So if those of you who like to add sugar to your coffees, consider that. A tablespoon of jelly or jam, a half a cup of ice cream, sorbet or frozen yogurt. A half a cup isn't much, it's the half size of my fist. Okay, so when we get out our bowl and we put in a few scoops, that can add up pretty quickly. So that's another good thing you want to try to measure. And really scoop yourself a small portion and pay attention to, how it tastes while you're eating it, because really we once heard from one of my professors, we really only taste the first few bites. And I thought, no, I taste it the entire time. Well, when you really think about it, it tastes real good the first few bites. And after that, you're kind of mindlessly eating if you're not paying attention. So just keep that in mind to help you reduce portions if you do have a sweet tooth. You start eating less over time, you will crave less. And then a serving of a small cookie. So I want to give you a quick tidbit that I don't have here on this slide, but if you want to see how many teaspoons of sugar are in the product you're eating, so for example, the yogurt that I like, 17 grams. Well, take that number and divide by 4. And that's going to give you almost 4 teaspoons of sugar that's in that product. So another example, easy numbers this time, round numbers. If you take a can of Coke, let's say it has 32 grams of sugar. Divide that number again by 4, and you get 8 teaspoons of sugar in that product. So you think about, that mindlessly eating. When you look at a product and look at the gram sugars, you might think twice about grabbing that when you realize how many actual teaspoons of sugar are in that. It definitely puts in perspective. And I went to my son's class when he was in grade school, and we measured out the sugar content in an apple juice, orange juice, Skittles, a Coke, and even a Gatorade. And the class of 5th graders were shocked to see that the apple juice had almost just as much sugar in the bag as the regular soda did. So that's what I mentioned earlier. Try to avoid those fruit juices because they're loaded with sugar. Unless you're juicing your own, of course, it's still sugar, but much healthier. Okay, so this leads us into eating organically. Will eating organic foods prevent cancer? There really is no evidence-based data that eating organic foods will prevent cancer, and no studies have shown that the nutrient content of organic foods are superior to conventionally grown foods in vitamin and mineral content. But that being said, there's, of course, reasons to consider eating organic. They obviously have lower pesticides. They have lower amounts of synthetic food additives, and it's just a better use of natural resources such as land and water. So if you can afford organic, it's obviously great to go that direction, knowing that your food is just going to be naturally cleaner. And you can find out what foods are cleaner, what foods are dirtier meaning having more pesticides on them that we can't get off, from the Environmental Working Group. So the newest updated, they update it every year. The list changes from year to year, but the Dirty Dozen are the foods, like I said, with the most residue, pesticide residue, and then the Clean 15 are the foods that are the cleanest, that don't have as much residue on it. So I'm going to start with the Dirty Dozen here. These foods, as you might see, they're skins that you eat, like the peaches and the pears or the cherries and the strawberries. All these foods, we eat the whole fruit. And the pesticides are harder, it sticks to the foods more. The nectarines, apples, grapes. So if you love a lot of these foods and you can afford organic, I would suggest buying them organic, okay? Because you just will find that you're gonna get less pesticides. The Clean 15 here are foods that you typically take the outer coating off, like avocados, the sweet corn, pineapples, onions, papayas, all of these fruits, vegetables here, you're not necessarily eating the outer skin, so they're all cleaner. And so I would suggest maybe taking these slides and making a pocket guide for you and bring it to the grocery store. I know for myself, I love a Greek salad, and it contains tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers and onions. And you don't see, I'm going to go back here. You don't see some of those on this list this year, but I know that tomatoes and cucumbers have been on the list. Well, they're still here, tomatoes are, but like cucumbers have been on the list previous years. So since I love that salad, so colorful, full of phytonutrients, antioxidants, I make it often. I try to buy those ingredients organic. I try to buy most of mine, but sometimes maybe they're not available. Maybe I just can't afford them at the time, or they don't look as good as the other ones. So with your foods, I wanted to back up here, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but let me go back to the previous slide. For washing fruits and vegetables, so the ones you're buying that are dirty, that are on the dirty dozen, even all of them for that matter, wash them in 3 parts water, 1 part vinegar, and let them soak in that water for about a minute or 2. And then once they've soaked, then continue to wash them, scrub them a little bit if you can. And then you're just trying to get most of the pesticides off of them. Okay, so that will segue us nicely into the talk about grocery shopping and meal planning. All the daunting tasks. I know for myself, I don't always enjoy it. Try to coax my kids to go for me, but you can imagine what they're going to be grabbing. I think I taught them well, so we'll see. Okay, so here are some things we might always hear, and like I said, I might complain about some of these as well, but I might hear, maybe I don't have the time. I'm always on the go. I have so many appointments, which I totally understand. I don't have the energy to cook, or I don't know how, or I can't cook for only 2. Maybe I buy healthy food, but it goes bad before I can eat it, so I feel like I'm wasting money. Or even healthy foods are too expensive. So all of these may be barriers to allowing you to free your mind, have an open mind when going to the grocery store. So I'll try to give you some tips here to make it a little bit easier on yourself, and over time it takes practice, whether you're creating a list. So try to be prepared, have a list, plan what you need really before you go to the grocery store. This will prevent you from wandering down the aisles, throwing things in your cart. That being said, too, plan to go on a full stomach, because if you go hungry, you're probably going to do the same. You're going to throw things in the cart and you get home and think, okay, why did I buy this? But yeah, so just be prepared. Make a list of what you want to plan to have for the week, and try to prevent going through the middle aisles, which have a lot of the processed food, packaged chips, cookies, snacks, and so on. And then, while you're cruising around the grocery store, try to ignore the displays, because food companies will pay grocers a lot of dollars to place their food items in prime spots to catch your eye. And I've seen that in every grocery store I go to. So just be aware of that and try to avoid those displays, and then even avoiding all that junk food that might be at the cash register as well. They all try to grab our attention. So shopping local, this can be helpful as well. Ask your grocer about the fresh and local produce in the store. It is actually less expensive since it doesn't have to be shipped, and the produce may be even more fresh because of that. So produce along the way loses a lot of nutrients and flavor the longer that it sits out. So keeping in that mind, and speaking of vegetables, as I say, load up on veggies. Frozen veggies and even fruits are sometimes going to be more nutrient dense and healthier than the fresh that you find on the shelf. So keep that in mind, as long as you're not buying the veggies that have the butter chips in them, or the cheese chips that melt with it when you're cooking it. So looking at how much you're eating in terms of vegetables, you might think you're eating enough, but the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported that less than 9% of Americans actually eat enough vegetables. So try to start with getting at least 1.5 to 2 cups of vegetables for lunch and dinner, and that's a good start. if you're one of that 9% and you're not eating enough. There's just so many benefits to the colorful fruits and vegetables, with the cell protection, protecting ourselves from oxidation and free radicals. So just all these benefits here. Okay, so the next thing is try to skip the processed meat, as I mentioned earlier. Eating too much red and processed meat can increase your risk for cancer, especially the ones, the processed meats with nitrates. Maybe replace some of those four-legged animals, processed meats, with fish or poultry. So an analogy I like to say, and this is funny, I think this will stick in your mind because I know it did for me when I heard it. I didn't come up with it, wish I did, but choose animals with less legs. Okay, so try to limit the beef, the pork, the lamb, and try to choose animals with 2 legs, the turkey, chicken, and ultimately no legs, the fish. Well, some seafood has legs, but you know what I mean, any of the sorts. Okay, so choosing the seafood, fish, more Mediterranean based. And then also, you can also get protein from non-animal foods, from the plant-based sources, like beans, nuts, tofu, quinoa. Okay, and then as I mentioned a little bit earlier, sticking to your budget with frozen foods, these can be just as healthy. I like this picture here, this product, I should say, I like the picture too, it's pretty, but the organic super smoothie blend, that comes from Costco. Okay, so that's Clovis Farms is a brand from Costco, and within that bag of fruit, you guys, the frozen fruit, there's 6 bags, individual bags of frozen berries and almost like ice cube frozen, that size roughly, of kale and spinach. So I often use that in my smoothies and my overnight oats. It's just wonderful. It's just a quick way to get some good nutrition. So yeah, frozen fruits, frozen vegetables are always a great option to have. That's quick, you can have on hand. You know, if you're crushed for time, pull it out. It's right there. Steam them up, roast them, or put them in other items. Okay. Okay, so some more on grocery shopping. Before you put any food in your grocery cart, and as I mentioned a little earlier, you want to try to read the nutrition facts and the ingredients list. Try to stay away from foods that have more than 15 grams or 15 grams of sugar and the words that you can't pronounce. Because most likely those are synthetic additives. And anything, like I said earlier, 15 grams of sugar is almost considered dessert. So keeping that in mind. And then filling your cart with fresh frozen produce, whole grains, the lean proteins. All this can help you reduce your risk for cancer. So you can find some more good information, and maybe you've already looked at some of these sites, but at preventcancer.org. Okay, so the meal planning basics. As I mentioned with making a list, try to pick a day of the week. Maybe it's a Sunday, maybe it's a Friday, maybe it's the middle of the week on a Monday, and you want to create a weekly menu. Maybe if you're not doing any meal planning right now, you start with 1 or 2 meals and then go from there. Again, starting small. Choose a day that there's really no distractions. Maybe you don't have any appointments, no events, and then that will help you create your list faster. And then, enlist family members, grandkids, spouses, friends to help with that, help with meal planning, grocery shopping, even meal preparation can make it much more enjoyable. A few more shopping tips here. When you look at the list of ingredients, there's a few things I want you to try to avoid that are at the top list. So the first 6 or 7 ingredients, those are the top items that make up the bulk of your food. So the first one is hydrogenated oils. Well, those are trans fats, and most products have removed those from their foods. It was mandated by the FDA, so we don't see that as much. But the other ones are palm oil, which is an oil that's solid at room temperature, saturated fat, and then high fructose corn syrup you want to try to avoid in the top 5, 6 list of your ingredients as well. And one that I didn't add, but that's important too, you guys, is salt and and sugar. So looking at all those in combination and trying to find foods that are made, least amount of ingredients as possible. So if you buy old-fashioned oats that I have in, the one of the snack presentation that I have online here, it's oats. That would be the first ingredient, is just oats. And then the next one would be nut butter. So that's what you want to look for. Okay. And then limiting, choosing a variety of colors and flavors, of course. The more color, and I can't emphasize enough, the more nutrition you're getting, and probably the more fiber as well. And then limiting commercially prepared baked goods. They're going to be full of sugar, white flour. Buy frozen or canned fruits without the added sugar. So make sure they're just in their own juice versus sugar syrup. And then focusing on, again, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, which is the base of the Mediterranean diet. Okay, so once you're back at home, try to put the groceries away. Prep items that need to be prepped now. If you put this off, it may not get done. I know for myself, every time I go to the grocery store, I buy 6 or 7 types of vegetables just for my veggie tray. Not for my meal prep, but just for my veggie tray. I like to have a revolving veggie tray for the kids when they come home from work or school. There's something there that's healthy for them, so they don't grab some of the processed foods. Yes, we have those types of foods as well. They tend to, we'll pull up the veggie tray and they'll grab those. So you want to wash what you're going to use only. So wash what you're going to use, put it in that tray, and then put the rest in plastic wrap or foil, and that will preserve the longevity of that product. And I have a little cheat sheet here, how to prep your produce, how to wash it, and also how to store it. And that will be in, I think, the next slide. But that's super important to know that, so it does last longer, so you're not wasting money. I know for myself, I learned, a couple of years ago, celery, it just gets so wilty and soggy. It looks like a fly swatter after a couple of days. But I started wrapping it in plastic wrap or foil, and it's amazing. It lasts a week and a half in my fridge. You may not want to go that long. Of course, that being said, too, with people who are going through cancer treatment and may have a suppressed immune system, be really careful with that produce, washing it and not keeping it for more than, leftovers, so on, for 48 to 72 hours. And buying snacks, so if you're buying them in large packages, try to repackage it into smaller containers. We like to, as humans, Americans, we like to mindlessly eat. So if you're eating out of a bag, out of a box, we might sit there in front of our computer or from our phone, and we might have even a container of nuts. Before you know it, you might have 1,000 calories. So you have to be careful with that. I would suggest mindfully eating, packaging it, and then what you have there is what you get, and trying to find a way to keep your mind off going to grab another one of those bags. So one thing that I like to do when we talk about pre-packaging is batch meal prep. So this works wonderfully. And again, finding the day where you're less busy, you can sit down and spend an hour with a list and plan your meal prep. And once you go to the grocery store and come back, you can try to prepare some of those foods. So if you're doing salads, get out 3 or 4 containers, throw in the base of it, add the veggies, add the seeds, stick them in your fridge and grab and go. I like to do as simple as, a piece of salmon, a chicken breast, make 5 of them at a time, boil up some rice on the stove, or whether it's a mixed grain rice or a wild rice, and then maybe you get fresh veggies or frozen veggies, and you can steam those up. You can stick it all in your 5 containers. You have a 3-course meal. It's simple, you guys. It's nothing fancy. So it doesn't take too much time. It might take me a half hour to prepare that lean protein, that vegetable, and then that grain, and you're just getting a great variety of nutrition within that. So it does take time and it takes practice. It's just taking, it step by step and working your way towards finding a routine that works best for you, and then, maybe enlisting some friends, children, spouses to help you out. Okay, so here's that fresh produce guideline that I was referring to for refrigerated items, counter and pantry items. I won't go through it in detail because I'll let you take a peek at it later, but it just tells you how long it can be stored and if you're wrapping it in plastic wrap. One thing that I really learned by looking at this, we're all learning every day. It's a process, I didn't realize that you should wash your lettuce and your spinach. Wash it, dry it, and put it in the refrigerator, and that will increase the longevity. Most of this produce you want to wash what you're going to eat, and then keep the rest unwashed, and then that increases the longevity. So it is with lettuce and spinach that you do want to wash, it looks like. Okay. So when I talk about Mediterranean diet, these are some cookbooks that I want you to take a peek at. The reviews are great. I don't have them myself, but they're good for meal prep, 21-day fixed meal plan. So take a look at them. I have the links included. They're wonderful books to utilize to help yourself find some recipes. And then the snack demo here you can find online. I just whipped together some no-bake energy bites, oats and coconut flakes, chia seeds, ground flax, just a plethora of healthy ingredients. And then I can also incorporate those into the smoothies and my no overnight oats. So I talked about that in my video as well. Okay, so we have a few slides here left. I'm sure it looks like I might be running out of time. So sorry about that. But just identifying personal nutrition goals to reduce your risk for disease. And as I've mentioned again and again, trying to make too many changes can be overwhelming. So develop a strategy where you can start meeting your nutrition goals one step at a time. And you may start today with one small goal and work on that for a month. That's great. Maybe it's choosing more color in your diet. If you're choosing one color and maybe it's brown, try to choose green. So maybe you're choosing green and brown, and then work your way up from there. Maybe you're choosing fish 2 to 3 times a week and replacing that with red meat. So take a look at these goals and focus on, maybe set yourself a list. Start with number 1 and go from there. When you feel like you've conquered that, then add another goal to your list. Researchers have established that regular physical activity can improve your health by physical activity, by, of course, helping control your weight, maintaining healthy bones, muscles, and joints. Physical activity will also reduce your risk of developing high blood pressure and diabetes, promote your psychological well-being, of course. I know my family tells me, oh my goodness, you're crabby, get out for a run. So I'm like, okay, I'm out here. You can have dish duty. So physical activity is important for so many different things. Reducing your risk of death and heart disease, and reducing risk of premature death. So getting out there, click happy, and getting that heart rate going. And again, working your way up. It could be 5 minutes, increasing your minute by minute, each day, each week, but taking small steps as able, and of course as recommended by your oncologist if you're clear to start increasing your activity. And for those of you who are in treatment and you might feel so fatigued and that's the last thing on your mind, just know that a little bit of activity has been shown in the research to improve your energy levels. So again, at your own pace, your own level, it can be very helpful. So accountability is a big key to us as humans, and what can help us be successful in with our goals that we're creating. So determine resources that you can list to help you, and that might be your spouse, your family, your neighbors, maybe grocery store delivery, maybe church, and even food tracking. Maybe you track what you're eating. I tracked what I was eating when I worked at the Y when I was in college, because I had my clients do it. And I realized it was 3 o'clock and I hadn't had a single fruit or vegetable. I thought, well, I'm eating grains and dairy. So I had to adjust that. So it really puts in perspective what you're eating, what you're putting in your body. And the MyFitnessPal is great. It tells you your protein, your calories, your carbs, your sugars, all sorts of things. So it's a free app you can download on your phone or your computer, and it's something that can also help you with accountability. Okay. So additional resources, I've included the links here on the end of these slides. If you're interested in learning more about superfoods, go to the American Institute for Cancer Research website. But just note that not one food is super. They're all super in combination. If we're going to eat just blueberries, you're not doing anything too super to your body. It's good, better than ice cream, but superfoods and combinations make a super diet. So keeping that in mind. And then here are the links to the books that I have included that might be helpful for you when it comes to meal prep and planning. And now we can open it up for questions, guys. Sorry if I sped through that. pretty quickly at the end here.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for all the knowledge and all of the amazing tips and resources to make adequate lifestyle changes. So just briefly, we'll kind of probably stay on for the next 5 to 7 minutes for the Q&A session. But before we do that, I just wanted to let you all know that shortly after the session ends, you will be receiving an email to complete a survey. And so don't forget to do that for a chance to win a swag bag. So Kelly, we've already had a few questions come in from the registration. So we can just briefly start on those questions. So I know you talked a little bit about this, or mentioned it at least. So do you have any information on soy food consumption and estrogen receptive breast cancer?
Yeah, so absolutely. That's a good question, and it comes up a lot. Should I be eating soy foods? Should I not be eating soy foods? Soy foods actually are good for us to eat, even with estrogen receptor positive cancers. The American Center for Cancer Research suggests that eating 1 to 2 servings of whole soy foods each day is beneficial. And that being said, the products that you want to avoid would be the soy protein isolate. So that comes from those protein powders that are soy-based, those bars that are soy-based, some of the drinks that are soy-based. So being careful with avoiding the soy protein isolate is what I would suggest. Absolutely. But soybeans, soy milk, tofu, those are all good choices. They're okay to have.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So during the presentation, we had someone ask about speaking on free range meats. And so I know you touched a little bit more about organic foods, but if you can speak on that.
Yeah, so free range is the best option for you if you can. If you know farmer where you know the animal is grazing on free range, you're going to get more nutrients just from the free range, but also hopefully there'll be less hormones that you're consuming with buying free range and organic meats. Did that answer the question? I hope that answered the question. I always try to choose free range. We get a cow, well, not a whole cow, thankfully, a quarter of a cow, and my husband loves red meat, and we try to limit as much as we can, and we definitely purchase that from a farmer that we know is free range.
All right, and then I also see in the chat, there's a question about chicken and turkey bacon as being viable options to replace pork.
Yeah, so great question. I wish I would have brought that up. So turkey bacon, chicken bacon, turkey sausage, chicken sausage, or even just ground turkey, ground chicken, definitely better options, but you want to make sure they're lean or extra lean, especially the ground turkey and the ground chicken, because the regular versions, they're grinding up the skin with it as a filler, and it's not as lean and healthy as it should be. It may be even less healthy than ground beef. So be cautious with that and choose, anytime you're choosing any of those, make sure they're lean or extra lean. And in bacon itself, if you're specifically asking about bacon, just being cautious with those types of meats because they may still contain nitrates.
All right, and then also there's a question here about potassium, daily potassium, and keeping it below 2,000 milligrams. And so do you have any recommendations for resources on finding good recipes?
Yeah, so if the potassium's high, typically with kidney issues, if there's a chronic kidney disease, stage 3 or higher, 4 or higher, you want to limit the potassium. So it is 2,000 milligrams or less. So if you were to go to DaVita.com, you can get a plethora of information on the DaVita website that's going to list foods and the potassium content in foods. So that can help you keep it under 2,000 milligrams. But also, I believe the MyFitnessPal will track it for you. If you do need any more information on any of that and potassium, I can certainly help you with that. Just let me know.
I definitely love MyFitnessPal, so I highly recommend everyone to use it. And
Yeah.
so the last question that came through the chat box is, what are your thoughts on coconut oil?
Yeah, so coconut oil is one of those things that was all the buzz and all the craze, a few years ago or so on. I would suggest using coconut oil in place of other oils, but not using it in addition, adding it to your coffee, adding it here or there, just to add it. It is like palm oil. It is solid at room temperature, so it is a saturated fat. So you still want to use it sparingly. Coconut oil has minerals in it that have great health benefits as opposed to the palm oil that I mentioned earlier. So really just replace a vegetable oil with coconut oil if you're interested in using coconut oil for the health benefits. But ultimately, olive oil is one of the best oils you can choose. Just probably doesn't taste as good.
All right, well, thank you so much for that, Kelly. So those are all the questions that came through the chat box. So we had a few other questions that we weren't able to get through that came in through the registration. And so I think if you have the availability, Kelly, if you can answer some of those questions and then send them out via email, I'll send you those. And so again, thank you so much, Kelly, for all the information and for taking the time to present to us today. And so we look forward to seeing you all next week at the same time. You will be hearing from Kathy Skinner to learn more about how to add physical activity and wellness to cancer survivorship. So we hope to see you all then. Have a great night, and thank you so much for spending the time with us today.